Herkese merhaba. Bugün Classification of Surfaces konusundan bahsedeceğim. Öncelikle iki uzayın tanımını vererek başlayacağım. Bunlardan ilki Product Space. X ve Y herhangi iki tane uzay olmak üzere X'ten almış olduğum X uzayından almış olduğum X ve Y uzayından almış olduğum Y elemanlarının ikili sıralamasından oluşan kümeye ben Product Space diyeceğim. Diğer bir uzayım ise Cohesion Space. X'in bir topolojik uzay ve F'im de X'ten Y'ye örten bir fonksiyon. Y'nin alt kümesi olan açık bir kümenin ters görüntüsü X'te açıksa eğer ben bu uzayıma Cohesion Space diyeceğim. Ardından komplekslerden bahsedecek olursam eğer öncelikle bir n-sel tanımı vermem gerekiyor. N-seller aslında iç kısımlarının en boyutlu birim disklere homomorf olan yapılar ve aynı zamanda da boundary ya da frontary dediğimiz dış taraflarınınsa daha düşük boyutlu seller ve sonu sayıdaki sellerden oluşan yapılar aslında ve ben bu dış kısmınaysa sellerin faces'ı diyorum. Bu sellerimiz bizim zero dimensional'ımız bir point'i, one dimensional'ımız bir line segmenti, two dimensional'ımız bir poligonu, three dimensional'ımız ise bir solid poligon şeklinde karşımıza çıkıyor olacak. Bu sellerin aslında birleşimi bize bir kompleksi veriyor. Kompleksin tanımı ise sonu sayıdaki sel kümelerinin birleşim kümesi. Aynı zamanda da kompleksten aldığım bir selin tüm yüzleri de kompleksli olacak. Kompleksten almış olduğum iki tane selin iç kısımlarının kesişim kümeleri de boş küme olacak şekilde olan yapılar aslında. Bu görsellerde de basit anlamda kompleks örnekleri görüyoruz. Buradaysa kompleks olmamaya örnekler görüyoruz. Bir kompleksin realization'ı ise aslında kompleksteki tüm sellerin noktalarının kümesi oluyor. Bir uzaydan ayıran kısımsa aslında burası kompleksin realization'ı noktalar kümesi aslında. Kompleksteki sellerin noktalarının kümesi. Bir kompleks yapıyı nasıl oluşturuyoruz? Kompleksleri birleştirerek, yapıştırarak aslında oluşturuyoruz. Bunları da kenarlarından ve köşelerinden olacak şekilde yapıyoruz. Buradaki A1, A2, A1 string ifadeleri en sağdaki görselde bir A olacak şekilde, A'yı temsil edecek şekilde birleşiyor. Benzer şekilde de B de bu şekilde birleşiyor. Bu ise bir kompleks yapının nasıl oluşturulduğunu gösteriyor. Bir komplekste 3 farklı çeşit nokta türü var. Bunlardan ilki poligonumuzun iç kısmında olabilir ve bunun komşuluğu ise bize R2'deki birim diski andırıyor. Bir diğeri ise kenarlarda olabilir bu noktalar. Bunun komşuluğu ise bir yarım diski, half diski gösteriyor aslında. Bir diğer nokta örneğim ise köşelerde olabilir. Bu da sektör disk dediğimiz dilim disk olacak şekilde bir komşuluğa sahip. Bu komşulukların bir kompleks içerisinde birleşimdeki görselde burada görülmüş oluyor aslında. Şu noktada half disklerin nasıl bir birleştiğini görüyoruz. Benzer bir şekilde ise şu köşede de sektör disklerin nasıl birleştiğini görüyoruz. Basit anlamda yapıştırma işlemlerinden bahsedecek olursak eğer bir poligonun nasıl bir silindir olacak şekilde yapıştırıldığını görebiliyoruz burada. Aynı şekilde bir torus. Bunlar kompleks örneklerimiz. Bir sphere, Mobius band. Kompleksler arasında en yoğun çalışılan konular manifoldlar. Buradan da surfaces'lara geçiş yapacağız aslında. Önden manifoldların tanımını verecek olursam eğer bir manifold topolojik uzay öyle ki her bir noktasının komşuluğu topolojik anlamda n-dimensional, x merkezli, r yarıçaplı bir açık diske eşit olması ve aynı zamanda da iki noktasının birbirinden ayrık komşuluklara sahip olmasına biz manifold, yani bu uzaya manifold diyoruz. Two manifold ise genellikle surface olarak adlandırılıyor. Burada da yaygın olan surfaces'ların görsellerini görebiliriz. Bu surfaces'ların bazı karakteristik özellikleri var. Onları da bir tabloda aslında gösterdim. Bunlar boundaries'inin olup olmaması, cavity'sinin olup olmaması, handle'ının olup olmaması ya da orientable olup olmaması olarak karakterize edilebiliyor. Daha sonrasında ise bu surfaces'lar birbirlerine connect işlemi uygulanabiliyor. Bu connect sum of surfaces tanımını getiriyor. Buradaysa S1 ve S2 iki tane benim surfaces'ım. Ben bu surface üzerinden böyle küçük bir disk çıkarıyorum ve daha sonrasında bu diskin boundaries'inden olacak şekilde bir yapıştırma işlemi uyguluyorum. Buna da the connected sum of Sn S2 diyorum. Buradaki notasyondaki gibi gösteriyorum. Bu construction'ın aslında planar diagram olarak da ifade edilebiliyor. Bu planar diagramları da burada inceleyebiliriz. Burada a connected sum of n tori'nin nasıl gerçeklendiğini gösteren bir planar diagramım var. Burada aslında iki tane torinin birleşimi ve bu iki torinin birleşim işlemlerini devam ettirdiğimizde buradaki en sağdaki planar diagrama ulaşıyorum ve bu aklımda kalsın şimdilik. Benzer şekilde bir projective plane'i de aslında bir tane parçasını çıkarıp yapıştırdığımda ki bir planar diyagramı inceliyorum burada da. Bu işlemi sürdürdüğümde ise bu string ifade ve yönlendirmeye sahip bir planar diyagramı gözlemlemiş oluyorum. Buradan üçgenleme işleminden bahsedecek olursam eğer bir uzayın üçgenlenip üçgenlenememesi şu demek oluyor aslında. İki boyutlu two-dimensional topologic space'in üçgenlenebilir olması ancak two complex structure'ının realization'ının x uzayına eşit olması anlamını taşıyor. Buradaki üçgenlemelerde ek olarak birbirlerine sadece tek bir kenardan ve tek bir köşeden identified edilebilir veyahut da birbirlerinden ayrık olabilir. Bu altta aslında istemediğimiz üçgenlemeleri görüyoruz. Bir two complex nasıl üçgenleniyor? Bir poligonun iç kısmına bir köşe noktası ya da bir point koyuyoruz ve kenarlarındaki köşelerin birbirine bağlayacak şekilde ve bu köşeden geçecek şekilde yaptığımız uygulama işlemi bize bir poligonun üçgenlemesini veriyor. Bu genellikle tek seferde yeterli olmuyor. Ve bu yüzden de barycentric subdivision dediğimiz bir tanıma daha ihtiyaç duyuyoruz. Bu da üçgenlere ayrılmış bir poligonun tekrar üçgenlemesi işlemi aslında. Üçgenlerinin üçgenlemesi işlemi. Burada ilk barycentric subdivision'ımız ve burada da ikinci barycentric subdivision'ımız görüyoruz. Benzer şekilde buradaki üçgenimizin ortasına bir köşe yerleştirip kenarların orta kısımlarından olacak şekilde bağladığımızda barycentric subdivision'ımızı yapmış oluyoruz. Şimdi ben boundary'si sınırı olmayan bir yüzeyde bu identifier işlemlerindeki komşulukların nasıl göründüğünü bahsedeceğim aslında. Bu ilk görselde ki identified işlemindeki komşuluk bir diski gösteriyor. Yan taraftaki benim istemediğim bir görüntü çünkü birleşim işleminden sonra benim komşuluklarım, neighborhood'larım half disk şeklinde kalmış. Benzer bir şekilde köşeleri birleştirdiğimde ise gene bir tam disk görüntüsü görüyorum ve bunu işlemi uygularken de kenarların da birleştirme işlemi uyguluyorum ve sırasıyla T1, T2, Tn şeklinde yapıştırdığım kenarların baştaki üçgenin T1 kenarıyla sondaki üçgenin Tn kenarını birbirine yapıştırdığımda ben bu görüntüyü elde edebiliyorum. Bu benim gene istemediğim bir görüntü. Çünkü şu noktada, şurada görünüyor mu bilmiyorum ama bu noktada istediğim görüntüyü bozan bir üçgenleme var. Şimdi boundary'si olmayan yüzeylerle alakalı iki tane teoremim var triangulation işleminde. Eğer bir yüzey kompaktsa ancak ve ancak triangulation uses a finite number of triangles. Eğer ki bir yüzeyin bağlantılıysa buradaki üçgenleme işlemindeki sıraladığım T1, T2, Tn kenarlarının bir kenarı kendinden önceki gelen başka bir kenara yapıştırılmış, identified edilmiş olması gerekiyor. Böylelikle ben boundariesiz yüzeyime kompakt ve bağlantılı diyebiliyorum. Şimdi teoremime geçecek olursam eğer, bu teoremde bize diyor ki her kompakt ve bağlantılı surfaces bir tane sphere, bir tane connex sum of n-teoriye ve bir tane de connex sum of n-projective plane'e homomorf olduğunu söylüyor aslında. Bu ispatı verirken bunun nasıl gerçeklendiğini de göstermiş olacağım. Bunun için S bir üçgenlenmiş kompleks olsun. Benim S'm kompakt ve bağlantılı bir yüzey. Ben öncelikle bu kompakt ve bağlantılı yüzeyin planar diyagramını çıkarıyorum ve üçgenlemelere harfler atıyorum. Bu şekilde harflendirmeleri yapmış olduğum üçgenlemelerde ki poligonumun iç kısmında kalan üçgenlemeleri identified kabul ediyorum. Ve daha sonrasında geriye kalan harflendirmelere bakıyorum. Birbirlerini tekrar eden harflendirmeler varsa eğer bunları tekrardan bir harflendiriyorum. Bu sefer kenarlarını harflendiriyorum. Bu kenarlarını harflendirme uygulamasından sonra da gene kendisini tekrar eden bir string ifade görürsem eğer tekrar bir harflendirme işlemi yapıyorum. Bunu yaparken de yönlendirmeye uygun bir şekilde yapıyorum. Bunu yaptıktan sonra benim karşıma iki tane direction çıkıyor. Bunlardan ilki twist pair. Bu sağ tarafta görülüyor. Yani send direction olan bir direction çeşidi. Opposing pair ise birbirlerine ters olan opposing pair'larımız var burada. Ben öncelikle bir tane opposing pair'i eliminate etmek istiyorum. Bunun için içe doğru katlayıp yapıştırdığımda bu planar diagramın surfaces'ı bana aslında bir sphere olduğunu söylüyor. Eğer ki bu işlem devam ettirirsen, bunun dışında başka prosesler gerekirse onlardan bir tanesi istemediği bir tane köşeyi diğer bir köşeye çevirmek. Bunun için öncelikle köşelerimin niteliklerine bakıyorum. Yani burada üç farklı köşem var. Bu örnekte tek bir tane köşem var. Ben buradaki planar diyagramda seçmiş olduğum bir köşeyi bir başka köşeye çevirme işlemi uygulayacağım aslında. Mesela burada Q köşesini P köşesine çevireceğim. Bunun için ise bir üçgen parçası kesiyorum. Kestikten sonra olmasını istediğim yerdeki köşenin dışarıda kalacak şekilde, olmasını istediğim yere konumlanacak şekilde bir yapıştırma işlemi yapıyorum ve identified ettiğim kenarı tekrar bir düzenlediğimde ise ben istediğim köşeyi çevirmiş oluyorum. Daha sonrasındaysa ben twist pair'ları bir araya getirmek, collect etmek istiyorum. Bir arada olmasını istiyorum. Diyagramımdaki bir arada olmayan twist pair'larımı diagonal bir kesme işlemi uyguladıktan sonra çevirip yapıştırdığımda bir araya getiriyorum ve bu bir araya getirme işleminden sonra benim aslında yüzeyim connex sum of n projective plane, fakat bunun imagine edilmesi biraz sıkıntılı, yani zor olduğu için burada görsel bir örneğimiz yok. Daha sonrasındaysa pair of opposing pair'ları bir araya getirmek istiyorum. Pair of opposing pair ne demek? Burası bu sol tarafta gördüğümüz görseldeki B ve A bir pair. Üsttekiler de bir pair. Bu pair of opposing pair, bunların direction'ları birbirlerine opposing ve pair of opposing pair oluyor. Sağ taraftaki görselde ise tek bir tane opposing pair var. O da şurada gerçekleniyor. Bu şekilde takip ettiğim zaman şurada bir tane opposing pair'im var. Ben sol taraftakiyle ilgileneceğim. Bunun içinse üstten bir parça kesiyorum ve alt tarafına yapıştırıyorum. Bu işlemi yaptıktan sonra benim bir tane opposing pair'im yan yana gelmiş oluyor. Diğerini yan yana getirmek içinse benzer bir uygulama gerçekleştirdikten sonra benim pair'larım yan yana, opposing pair'larım yan yana gelmiş oluyor. Bu yan yana getirme işleminden sonraki planar diyagramın yüzeyi bana aslında connect sum of entry'yi vermiş oluyor. Böylelikle de aslında görüyoruz ki bu ispatta gerçekten bağlantılı ve kompakt bir yüzeyin bir tane sıfıra bir tane a connected sum of n projective plane'e a connected sum of n tori'ye homomorf olduğunu görüyorum. Bunların da kendi aralarında kombinasyonları var. Son bir örnek veriyorum. Bu örnek incelemesinden sonra da sunumumuz bitecek zaten. Buradaysa bir projective plane ile bir tori'nin birleşme ve yukarıdaki anlattığım işlemlerinin tümünü gözlemleyebileceğimiz bir uygulama işleminden sonra 3 tane projective two plane'e eşit olduğunu görüyorum aslında. Buradaki planar diyagramdaysa yukarıdaki anlattığım işlemlerin hepsini gözlemliyor oluyoruz. Benim sunumum bu kadardı. Beni dinlediğiniz için teşekkür ederim.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming for the morning session of the last day. Also, I would like to thank my mentor for all the job that we've done together throughout this time. The topic that I'm going to talk today is the symmetry of art, and we're going to talk about the 2D plane. And the symmetries of the 2D plane are, I'm going to talk about wallpaper groups. So this is the content of my presentation. The core of my presentation is the third point, the counting of wallpaper groups. We're going to determine the number of wallpaper groups, and we're going to try to prove this theorem. For this, we need some definitions from Euclidean group, wallpaper group analysis. Then I'm going to introduce you some restrictions and classification. We're going to look at the theorem and some examples, because for each wallpaper group that I'm going to present here, also I'm going to present a real art piece that corresponds to this wallpaper group, since my work is very much connected with art. Most of the artwork are going to be by Maurice Escher, a Dutch artist that you may know, whose art is very hugely inspired by mathematical concepts. And at the end, I'm going to suggest some generalization from 2D plane to some other surfaces. We're going to start with isometries and Euclidean group. As you may know, Euclidean group is the group of all isometries on the plane. The elements of the Euclidean group are translations, rotations, reflections, and glide reflections, which I'm sure you all know. This blue triangle, if we translate them, we get the first one. If we rotate it, we get the second one. If we reflect it, we get the third one. And I'm going to talk more about glide reflections, which you may not be familiar with. So the glide reflections are reflections followed by translation, parallel to the line of reflection. So as you can see here, first we reflect the triangle by the vertical line, and then we translate it by the vector parallel to the vertical line. So this is what we're going to call glide reflections. All these elements form subgroups of Euclidean group, and we're going to next we're going to look at translations and rotations, consider some restrictions, and try to classify them. Important theorem that we're going to use is that every element of the Euclidean group can be presented as rotation or reflection, followed by a translational vector. So rotations and reflections are actually elements of the orthogonal group, and translation is just a vector. We're going to use this notation, V and M, where V is the vector of translation and M is the orthogonal group, which is going to represent rotation or reflection. Group operation is defined as follows. And also we can define a homomorphism pi from the group to G by just taking the orthogonal matrix that this rotation or reflection represents. We can check if this is really a homomorphism just by using this formula here and apply the definition. Important thing here is the kernel of this homomorphism is a translational subgroup, because the second element of translational subgroup is always identity matrix. Now we're ready to move on wallpaper groups, which is discrete subgroup of Euclidean group containing two linearly independent translations. The important word here is discrete, which means that we have the smallest vector of non-zero length, of a positive length, which we're going to consider in the definition of lattice. Also, two definitions that follows is translational group, which is something we already talked about. It is just a subgroup of a wallpaper group with pure translations, and the point group, which is defined as the image of the wallpaper group under the isomorphism pi. So again, we just take the second element from the vector, and as I already said, it is either a rotation or a reflection. Theorem that we're going to use is that the point group is isomorphic to wallpaper group modulo T. And this theorem follows from the first isomorphism theorem if we consider that the translation group is the kernel of homomorphism pi, and the point group is the image of the wallpaper group under this homomorphism pi. Finally, we get lattices. As I mentioned in the definition of a wallpaper group, we have two linearly independent translations. And the lattice is a set spawned by these two linearly independent translations. For some simplicity reasons, vector T, as I said, is the smallest vector on the plane. And we're going to choose vector T2 as the next smallest vector on the plane, which is not parallel to the vector T1. Here you can see two lattices. One is done by Maurice Escher, as I already said. The other one is done by me. So which one would you prefer? Which one is the better wallpaper? Well, I'm sure everybody would prefer the second one, but actually they're identical. What I did, I just marked all these points here and defined the vectors T1 and T2, which are the generated vectors of the lattice. Also, we're going to define a fundamental cell, which is the smallest finite area that is repeated throughout the plane. So now we're ready to do some classification. We're going to first look at rotations, then we're going to look at translations, and we're going to try to somehow describe wallpaper groups in terms of these definitions. And it turns out that the order of rotation in a wallpaper group can only be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6, which follows from a very simple theorem, which is called the crystallographic restriction theorem. To prove it, we just take 2 points, A and B, and the length of the spanning vector is going to be T. We rotate one. First, we consider a rotation of a finite order Q. We rotate one point by 2 pi over Q, the other point by minus 2 pi over Q, the inverse of this rotation. And we obtain the line segment A prime B prime, which should be the length between these 2 points should be some integer multiple of T. Since we know that the wallpaper group operations should preserve the lattice. So the distance between any two points should be the integer multiple of the vector. We can solve this simple equation, and from it just naturally follows that the orders can be one of these 5 elements, and you can calculate the corresponding angles yourself. Now we go back to translations, and we're going to consider 2 vectors that I would mention, basis vectors, T1 and T2. We're going to compare their length, and we're going to compare the lengths of the diagonals of the parallelogram that they span. If none of them are equal, we get oblique or parallelogram lattice. If some of them are equal, we get rectangular, and so on. I think you're familiar with how do the diagonals compare with the length of each side. Many of you may know that the rhombic shape also tile the plane infinitely. So why don't we have a rhombic lattice, which is presented by this? Well, we need to consider the definition of a change of basis. So some of the vectors are actually same. For example, here we can just consider this vector T2 instead of this one, and the lattice are going to be completely the same. So which lattice corresponds to the rhombic one? Actually, this is centered rectangular. As you can see, we can take either these two vectors or these two vectors, and they're going to span the same centered rectangular lattice. Just for simplicity, we consider it like this. So we're almost ready to look at the theorem. We need to consider some more group theory definitions for this. The first one is simple one. The point group J should act on lattice. What it means that the rotations or reflections, the elements of the point group, just take the lattice to itself. So the point of the lattice just being mapped by themselves. From crystallographic restriction theorem, the second one follows that the point group can only be one of the following. It's either a cyclic group of 1 of 5 orders or dihedral groups if there is a reflection presented. And, well, the group D1 is isomorphic to C2. So we can consider just 9 point groups that can exist in any wallpaper. The important part is the isomorphism between wallpaper groups, which maps translations to translations, rotations to rotations, reflections to reflections, and light reflections to light reflections. However, the converse is not necessarily true. The same point group, for example, the point group that just consists of one reflection, can be mapped to 2 distinct wallpaper groups, which are not isomorphic to each other. I'm going to give an example of this a bit later, but it is an important concept to consider. And the fourth part is that the wallpaper group is a semi-direct product of a translation group with a point group, which has a structure Z squared, the infinite group, and P finite group. Finally, where is this big theorem? So it says that there are exactly 17 distinct wallpaper groups, which sounds kind of small because I consider them to be infinitely many of them, which is just all the tilings of the plane that we can consider. This is how we're going to prove. You already know the classification of lattices by shapes. We're going to consider all of them, and we're going to try to come up with point groups that can correspond to this lattice. Then we're going to try to find all subgroups generated by the point group and find the associated wallpaper group to this point group. And at the end, of course, we should verify that none of the 2 wallpaper groups that we found are isomorphic to each other and count the results at the end. Before coming to classification, I'm going to introduce some notation. P and C will describe the cell, which parallelogram and all the other shape has primitive lattice or primitive cell, and the centered rectangular, if you remember, or rhombic one, is going to have a center as well. We're going to use M for reflection, G for light reflection, and some numbers for order of rotations. And on this picture, you can see rhombus are the centers of a 2-fold rotation. Triangles are going to be the centers of 3-fold, squares of 4-fold, and hexagonals of 6-fold. And in yellow color, the fundamental cell is colored. So we're going to have some restrictions within the cell. And this is just the unique pattern that is not going to be repeated at all throughout the code. So this is like the smallest part of it. You can consider just the simple parallelogram lattice that does not have any restrictions in terms of angles, length, or anything, which the point group corresponds to just the identity matrix and the rotation by 180 degrees. Subgroups correspond to P1 and P2. P1 is just, there's no rotations, there's no reflections, there's just translations. So if you consider this parallelogram infinitely in 2 directions, you just get the lattice, you just get the simplest wallpaper group. P2 corresponds to rotation by 180 degrees. Every one of these rhombus is the center of this rotation. Here we can see the actual examples of it. P1, as I can see, there's just translations. Hopefully you can see why. So the same pattern is repeated just in two directions. And in P2, we have some centers of rotation, for example, here or here. These are pictures from Escher, and in his works, he leaves the lattice in pencil to us, so we can actually see what the primitive lattice is and how he designed these images. When we introduce rectangular lattices, there's a 90 degrees angle, so the two more operations in point group are reflections in two orthogonal axes. It's an important point that in crystallography and the notation that I implied, b pi, which is rotation, but it's not by pi degrees, but by pi over 2 degrees, every time we're going to halve an angle. So b0 and b pi are orthogonal axes of reflection. And if you remember, we had a point that one point group can be mapped to two different wallpaper groups. This is actually the case. Because if you consider light reflection, which is reflection followed by a translation, the homomorphism pi that we defined just takes the reflection matrix as the image of light reflection. So if we have a reflection in the point group, we actually don't know if it comes from simple reflection or if it comes from light reflection. That's why there are two different point groups with there's two different wallpaper groups with one reflection. This one is a mirror symmetry, this one is a glided symmetry. So this one is the glided symmetry axis. As you can see, there's no actual reflection line, no images is reflected. But it is reflected and translated by a vector. If we consider the maximal point group, we get two orthogonal axes of reflection, which either of them can be a mirror or a glide reflection. And you can see the lattices here. These lines represent the mirror, as you can see, the usual reflection. And these lines represent the glided reflection axis. Of course, there's a lot of rotational points that are followed from parallelogram lattice. We don't use them here in this classification because the point group contains mirrors and glide reflections. Here are some real examples. I hope you can see that the mirror lines of this image are vertical lines. They go between the cells and they go inside the cell. So this is basically why we cannot have just a unique image inside the cell. That's why we have some restrictions, which you can see only half of the image can be unique. And it's even less and less. The more rotations, the more reflections we have. This one's the glide reflection. I hope this picture helps you understand it a bit more. There's no mirror lines on this image. We cannot find any. However, we can see that this fundamental cell or a particle is actually reflected by a vertical line. So, as you can see here, there's lattice, it's a rectangular lattice. The axis of glide reflection is vertical, and the glide reflection is vertical. These ones are more examples. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time to go over these examples in detail. But if you have any questions afterwards, I will look at these pictures again once more with you. We get centered rectangular lattices when we consider the equality of some sides, which are actually exactly the same with usual rectangular lattices, but they have a bit more glide reflection symmetries, since the center of the parallelogram should be also a point of lattice. So we get one more point, that's why there's just more restrictions. Here are some examples. We get square lattices, which just contains two more rotations. We can just rotate by 90 degrees now. The squares is the centers of rotation by 90 degrees. We get again some mirror symmetries. and we get some glided symmetries. Here are the examples of these beautiful lattices. And finally, hexagonal, the hardest one, because there's the most number of lattices. There's a very big maximum subgroup, and we can find a lot of actual subgroups of this point group, which can correspond to different images. I'm not going to go into many details. I'm just going to briefly talk about this two and what are the actual differences between them, because we haven't seen number one before. It corresponds to order one rotation, which is nothing. These are the simple examples, this rotation of order 3, rotation of order 6, and rotation of order 6 with their mirror, vertical mirror lines. This one's actually the hard part. So we're going to consider lattices, and we're going to consider some differences between them. Why actually P3M1 and P31M are different. The lattice here, as you can see, is this parallelogram. And if we consider this triangle, it has mirror lines as the size of the triangle. I think you can see it. And it has the rotational order 3 point here. However, here, we consider this the cell. It does not have a symmetry line here. It has two centers of rotation of order 3. And the mirror lines of reflection actually pass through this center of rotation. This is why these lattices are different. Difference between letters just tells us that this one, the reflection lines pass through the center of rotation, and here they do not pass through the center of rotation. Center of rotation is here, mirror lines are here. So that's all. This is all the wallpaper groups that can ever be in 2D. We get this correspondence, and we can see why some of them are not isomorphic to any. For example, P3, from these point groups, there is none that is isomorphic to C3. So we can easily see that P3 is unique. The only complication comes from dihedral groups of order 1, 2, and 3. It is a very interesting topic, and there's a lot of algebra related to this. Basically, what I can see here easily is that the point group, okay, it is the dihedral group of order 1, 2, or 3, but the actual point groups are different. They're different matrices. They're not isomorphic to each other. That's why they're good. We can generalize these concepts. First of all, we can generalize it to 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions using relatively same proof that I presented here. And there is 230 crystallographic space that exists in 3D. They're used to describe crystal structures and atomic structures within them. Or we can try to study some wallpaper-like classifications on different surfaces. For example, on sphere, there's finite number of special spherical symmetry groups, which is actually less than 17. I leave this number to you. And in the hyperbolic plane, you can see it here, there is infinitely many hyperbolic tiling groups, which is a pretty fascinating fact. But we should use some different kind of proof to prove this. These are my references that I used in my work. And finally, I should say that during the work on this project, I have seen this building inside the campus, and I've seen lattices basically everywhere where I go. So this one looks very symmetrical, but unfortunately, this is just a simple P1 wallpaper build. It doesn't have any reflections, doesn't have any rotations, because this little part is missing. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Mentorime ve DRP ekibine teşekkür ederim. Bugün Jacobi'nin 4 kare teoremini modular formlar aracılığıyla kanıtlayacağım. Bu teorem nedir? İlk önce 1770'te Lagrange her doğal 4 sayının toplam şeklinde yazılabileceğini ispatladı. Sonra 1834'te Jacobi bu yazılışların kaç farklı şekilde olabileceğini ortaya eden formülü keşfetti. Formu bu şekilde. Eğer n sayısı için hesaplamak istiyorsak 4'e bölünemeyen tüm bölenlerini toplayıp 8 ile çarpıyoruz. The action of SL2Z ile başlayacağım. SL2Z grubu bildiğiniz üzere ikilik tam sayılardan oluşan ve determinantı 1 olan matrisler grubu. Bu grubun upper half plane yani imajiner kısmı pozitif olan kompleks sayılardan üzerine nasıl hareket ettiğini söyleyen bir lema. Fractional linear transformations şeklinde hareket ediyor. Yani SL grubunun bir elemanı upper half plane üzerinde bu şekilde bir group action sağlıyor. Ve SL için bu group action sağlandığında SL'in tüm alt grupları için de sağlanır. SL'in generator matrisleri bu iki matris. İlk matrisimizi Mobius dönüşüm, daha demin dönüşüm aynı zamanda Mobius dönüşümü oluyor. Mobius dönüşümünü uyguladığımızda Z'den Z artı 1'e götüren bir dönüşüm sağlıyor. İkinci generator matrisimizde Z'den S1 bölü Z'ye götürüyor. Modüler formlar nedir? Upper half plane üzerindeki holomorfik fonksiyonlardır. Bu iki koşulu sağlamak üzere. Bu koşullarda kimlik koşulu, yani Mobius dönüşümü girdiğiniz bir fonksiyon k weight'de bu sonucu vermesi gerekiyor. Ve ikinci koşulda fonksiyonumuzun sonsuzda homomorfik olması gerekiyor. Eisenstein serileri, bu seriler modüler formların en temel örneklerinden biri. Genel tanımına bakarsak eğer, upper half plane'den aldığımız bir Z için GKZ serisi, k weight'li bu fonksiyonun toplam serisidir. M ve N aynı anda sıfır olmak üzere tam sayılar. Bu seride eğer k sayısı 2'den büyükse seri mutlak yakınsar. 2'ye eşitse mutlak yakınsamaz. Eğer tek sayıysa da negatif ve pozitif terimler birbirini sıfırlayacağı için seri sonucu sıfır olur. O yüzden biz modüler formlar için k'nin büyük eşittir 3 ve çift olduğu durumları konuşacağız. Peki bu haliyle modüler form koşullarını sağlıyor mu? İlk koşul için yani Mobius dönüşümü ilk koşulumuz. Bu iki matrisi kullanacağız. Çünkü bunlar generator matrisler ve SL grup action'ı için SL grup action'da çarpımsal kapalığa sahip. İlk matrisimizdeki dönüşümü uyguladığımızda seride Z artı 1'i yazdığımızda ve içini düzenlediğimizde en son N'yi M artı N olarak bir indekslersek istediğimiz sonuca ulaşıyoruz. Yani GKZ artı 1 GKZ eşittir. İkinci matrisimiz için de yine tekrar yerine koyup düzenlediğimizde ve hem M'yi hem de N'yi reindekslediğimizde istediğimiz sonuca ulaştık. Demek ki iki matris için de Mobius dönüşümleri sağlanıyor. İkinci koşulumuzda sonsuzlu holomorfiklikte GK'nın sonsuzlu holomorfik olduğunu daha sonra konuşacağız. Şimdilik kanıt yapıldı diye kabul ediyorum. Principal subgroups of SL2. İlk önce gamma L diye bir grubu tanıtmak istiyorum. Modemde 1001 matrisine denk olan matrisler grubudur. Biz SL'de aldığımız her gamma subgrubu için eğer bu grupla SL'in arasında kalıyorsa o subgruba congruous subgroup diyoruz. Örnek olarak gamma not of n C sıfıra denk olmak, modemde sıfıra denk olmak üzere matrisler oluşuyor. Gamma üzerinde modüler form, yine aynı Mobius dönüşümü ve sonsuzda holomorfik olma koşulları, yani kimlik koşulu daha doğrusu ve sonsuzda holomorfik olma koşulları sağlamamız gerekiyor. Bu koşulları sağlayan fonksiyonlar gamma üzerinde modüler formlardır. Ve bu tür modüler formların oluşturduğu sayıda MK gamma diyeceğiz. Bu theta function. Jacobi theta function'ı operatif plane üzerinde şu şekilde tanımlanan bir fonksiyondur. Burada e üzeri 2 pi i z yerine q yazarsak mutlak q birden küçük olur ve bu seriyi elde ederiz theta fonksiyonu olarak. Biz geometrik serinin mutlak yakınsadığını biliyoruz. Yani iyi tanımla. Açılımlarına bakarsak geometrik serinin 2 katından daha küçük theta. O yüzden ona da iyi tanımlı diyebiliyoruz. Theta serisine, daha doğrusu fonksiyonunu k defa kendiyle çarparsak bu sonucu elde ederiz. RKN Jacobi teoreminden de hatırlayacağınız üzere n sayısını k tane sayının karesi şeklinde yazılabilme sayısı veren. Evet, biz biz 4 kare teoremi olduğu için k'yı 4 almak istiyoruz. O yüzden theta fonksiyonunda 24 yazdığında R4n elde ediliyor. Bunu da daha sonra kullanacağız. Lemma, gamma notoforun üreteç matrisleri. Bunlar mı? Bunun üzerine basit bir kanıtımız var. Bizim gamma notofordan aldığımız bir matris for olduğu için C sayısı sıfıra denk olması lazım mod 4'te. O yüzden ya 0 olacak ya da 4'ün katı olacak. Eğer C 0'sa A ile D'nin artı eksi 1 olması gerekiyor. Neden? Çünkü gamma notofor S'nin alt grubuydu. Determinantı 1 olması gerekiyor. O zaman zaten elde ettiğimiz matris 1, 1, 0, 1'in B katıyla, B'inci kuvvetiyle üretilebilir. İkinci koşul da C'nin 0 olmaması. O zaman da şöyle yapıyoruz. Bu matrisi üreteç matrislerimizin kuvvetleriyle çarpıyoruz. Eğer ilkinin kuvvetiyle çarparsak ikinci sütunumuz değişiyor. Diğer matrisin kuvvetiyle çarparsak ilk sütunumuz değişiyor. Biz bu kuvvetleri istediğimiz gibi seçersek sayıları küçültebiliriz ta ki C 0 olana kadar. O zaman zaten ilk koşula geri dönüyoruz. C 0 olduğunda zaten 1, 1, 0, 1 matrisiyle üretilebiliyor. Theta Z'nin 4. kuvveti bir modüler formudur. Evet, 2 ağırlıklı bir modüler form. Sadece kimlik koşulu sağlığını göstermemiz yeterli. Çünkü theta fonksiyonunun kendi tanımı da Fourier serisi, negatif kuvveti olmayan bir Fourier serisi olduğu için bu sonsuz homomorfikliğe denk. İlk koşulda bizim generator matrislerle göstermemiz yeterli. Çünkü group action çarpı altını kapalı demiştik. Evet. Burada Z'den Z artı bir dönüşümü sağlayan matris için basitçe görünüyor. Diğer matrisimiz için de bunu sağlamamız gerekiyor. Ama bunu sağlamak için ilk önce bunu kanıtlama ihtiyacımız var. Bunu burada kullanacağız. Yani -1/4Z dönüşümü eşitliği. Bunun için de Poisson summation formülü kullanacağız. Her Schwarz fonksiyonu için, Schwarz fonksiyonunda tam olarak tanımlı değil ama şu şekilde düşünebilirsiniz. Eksponansiyel bir şekilde azalan, yani çok hızlı azalan bir durum. O yüzden o fonksiyonun serisi bizim Fourier transformation serimize eşit. Formülü bunu söylüyor. Bunu yerine koyup uyguladığımızda istediğimiz dönüşümü elde ediyoruz. -1/4Z için. Bunu kanıtladıktan sonra asıl istediğimiz ikinci üreteç maddesinin eşitliği için de 2 kere o dönüşümü uygulayarak istediğimiz sonuca ulaşıyoruz. Yani 2 matris için de yine ispatlanmış oldu. Evet. O zaman theta Z'nin 4. kuvveti bir modüler formdur. Ve o zaman da M2 notoforun bir elemanıdır. Evet, M2 notoforun elemanıysa onun bazlarının lineer kombinasyon şeklinde yazılabiliyor olması lazım. Bizim uzayımızın boyutu 2, o zaman 2 tane bazı var. İkisini bulursak yazabiliriz. Burada G2Z'yi anlatacağım. Daha önce Eisenstein serisinde G2'nin mutlak akılsımadığını söylemiştik. Ama eğer biz G2K'yı Fourier expansion şeklinde tanımlarsak bu şekilde Fourier expansion mutlak yakınsıyor. O yüzden K yerine 1 yazdığımızda artık bizim G2 serimizde iyi tanım olacak. Ve bunu kullanacağız. Artık bu tanımı kullanacağız. G2 bu dönüşümleri sağlıyor mu? Biz bu dönüşümleri Mobius dönüşümü olarak genelleştirebiliriz. Çünkü S ve T üreteç matrisleri için group action için kapalı olduğundan dolayı bunları kullanabiliyoruz. Burada tam sağlamıyor. Çünkü şu kısma kadar doğru ama böyle bir sorun var. Bu sorunu nasıl giderebiliriz? Yeni bir form tanımlıyoruz. G2N diye. G2Z serisinden N kere G2NZ'yi çıkardığımızda. Biz daha önceki lemmadan G2-2 ve G2-4'ün aslında modular formlar olduğunu ispatlayabiliriz. Ve G2-2 ile G2-4'ün Fourier expansion'ına baktığımızda ilk üç teriminin katsayıları farklı olduğu için lineer bağımsız olduklarını da söyleyebiliriz. O zaman bunlar hem M2 gamma not of for'un elemanıysa, çünkü modüler formlar, hem de lineer bağımsızsa biz o zaman o ikisiyle theta fonksiyonunu yazabiliriz. İkisinin lineer kombinasyon olarak theta'nın 4. kuvvetini yazacağız. Burada işlemleri yaptığımız zaman E üzeri 2 A 0 B'de eksi 1 bölü pi kare buluyoruz. Daha sonra en son bu sonuca ulaşıyoruz. Buradaki katsayımız ilk Jacobi formülündeki gösterimle aynı. Yani D sayısı N sayısı, Z sayısı için dörde bölünemeyen tüm verenlerin dörde bölünemeyen tüm verenlerin toplamının 8 katı olacak şekilde buluyoruz. Böylece ispatlanmış olur.
Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about an algebraic view of the Jukes Cantor Phylogenetic tree model. Phylogenetic tree models evolutionary relationships between species. And we use probabilistic models to describe these sequences of evolution. And we use algebraic, and this approach reveals structural properties and invariants are useful for inference. And we will look at the Jukes Cantor model for this probabilistic models. We use polynomial functions in affine spaces and also polynomial ideals. And algebraic varieties are solution sets of these polynomials, and we will define that also. We use also coordinate transformations to simplify parametrizations. We will come to the parameterization part later. And for solving systems, we will learn how to find Grosvenor bases. This is definition of monomial. And here is a monomial we have. P1, P2, PRs are variables, and U1, U2, UR construct a vector in NR, which has non-negative integers in it. And the summation of these monomials are constructed as polynomial. Here's an example of monomial, P1 square times P3 to the 4. And this is not example because it has negative exponent. This is infinite series, so it has infinitely many elements. This is also not a polynomial. We must have finitely elements. Here's a definition of variety. S is set of polynomials, and variety of S is set of points which make this polynomial 0. Let us look two examples of this. Z minus x square minus y, variety of this can be seen like this, and variety of x square minus y square z square plus z cube can be seen like that. Also, let W is a set of polynomials. The vanishing ideal of W is an ideal which has elements f. If we put a's in it, it will be 0. And generating an ideal is important in our case. Fi's are in F, and it generates an ideal like this. These are linear combinations of F's in F, and it generates an ideal. This theorem is important, Hilbert basis theorem. It says that in a polynomial ring, Kp, in ideal in Kp, it has finite generating set. We can finitely generate all ideals in Kp. We will use the term order. A term order is to be total order. It must satisfy these two conditions. Most common one is lexicographic order. Let us define that. We can say that PV is greater than PU if and only if I said at the beginning V and U are vectors. If we calculate V minus U and we look at leftmost non-zero element of V minus U, if it is positive, PV is greater than PU. Otherwise, if it is negative, then PU is greater than PV. Here's an example. P1 cube, P1 square times P2. The vector of this is 3, 0, 0, and vector form of this is 2, 1, 0. If we do this calculation, we have positive at the leftmost, so this is greater than that. We use also S polynomials to find Grobner bases. The S polynomial of F and G can be calculated with this formula. X to the gamma means least common multiple of leading monomial of F and leading monomial of G. Let us give an example to S polynomial. F and G are these polynomials, and we use lexicographic order as I mentioned. The leading monomial of F is that one we wrote here. The leading monomial of G is that one we wrote here. And least common multiple of these two monomials are x to the 4 y square. We wrote that and we calculated the S polynomial of Fg. Where can we use it? We use it in Buchberger's criterion. We have this algorithm for finding Grobner basis to an ideal. We have these generating polynomials. If we look at these polynomials, S polynomial 2 by 2, if we get 0, then we are done. If we don't get 0, we add that new S polynomial in the set. And finally, we get the Grobner basis for that ideal. We have also another method to use to find Grobner basis. I used Macaulay 2 codes to calculate it. Here is their codes, and this is Grobner basis of our ideal. Let us come to our main goal. We use DNA sequences to construct some trees, phylogenetic trees, and we use some models. Phylogenetic models are used to describe the evolutionary history of sequence data over time. We use rooted trees, and each vertex I in our trees associate to a sequence on some alphabet. K is the number of terms in that alphabet. Commonly used ones are K equals 4 and K equals 20. K equals 4 means DNA bases, adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. And K equals 20 are used for 20 amino acids. Let us recall what a graph is. Graph has vertices and edges, and trees are connected graphs with no cycles in it. We label these edges using parameters, and in our study we use tripod trees, which means that trees with 3 leaves. And let me explain what a leaf is. Leaves are vertices which has 1 edge, and this is leaf. These 2 are leaf. Connected to 1 edge, they are leaves. In Markov process, we have random variables. I forgot the explained root. This is the root vertex. We will see how it works. And we use substitution matrices this is an example of substitution matrix. It has conditional probabilities in entries. Here's an example of a tree. P to the T, ATC. And here, T means tree. Since we are in tree topology, we use T. And ATC means seeing adenine at the first leaf, seeing thymine at the second leaf, and seeing cytosine at the third leaf. We will calculate how to find probability of seeing these ATC at the leaves. And this polynomial will give us the probability of that. We use a map and we construct this map using parameters C to the 4 cross C to the 4, C to the 4. If we have 3 leaves, then we have 3 times C to the 4. So 64 possibilities in total. Phylogenetic variety of that tree is a complement of image of phi t, and phylogenetic invariants are the ideal of this variety. The polynomials in ideal T represent algebraic relations with probabilities. And in our study, we compute these invariants by analyzing the values of combinatorial polynomials. But also we can use Grosvenor basis to find these polynomials. This is an easy example. In here, k equals to, before we had 4 possibilities, A, T, G, C. In here, we have binary states, 0 and 1. We have 4 edges, A, B, C, D. We will use that also. Root distribution is P0 and P1. And we have 4 transition matrices. Here's our transition matrices. We have matrices for each edge. We have 4 matrices, and each has 4 entries. We have 16 parameters. And from root distribution, we have P0 and P1. It will give us 2 parameters. In total, we have 18 parameters in our domain. For our codomain, we have 2 possibilities for each leaf, and 2 cross 2 cross 2, 8 leaf combinations we have. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. These are combinations. Here's our polynomial. Phi ijk means seeing ij and k at the first, second, and third leaf. And we have 8 such polynomials, since 2 for each leaf. We use factorization to compute our maps efficiently, and it is much easier. Now it is main topic, Jukes Cantor model. And our last example. In here also, we are in tripod tree, since it's easy to calculate the possibilities. We are using DNA, and for each leaf, we have 4 possibilities. The root distribution is uniform in that case. Each can be appear 1 over 4 possibilities. And we have 4 edges, since we have 4 transition matrices. Each matrix can be seen like that. This is our map. P1 cross P1 cross P1 cross P1. Each came from each edge. And our codomain is P63, since we are in projective space. Also, these combinations are 64. We have 64 combinations, so each probability. This is our polynomial. PAA is the probability that seeing A adenine at all leaves. And each term in that polynomial represents a path from root to leaves. Let us recall what a root is. From here to here, these terms corresponds to these paths. And we have 64 possible P, X, Y, Z values. And let us calculate some of them. But we have 64, and in other words, we use some symmetries, and together with these, we reduce the number of them. We don't have to calculate all 64 of them. PAAA, if we use that states A equals 0, C equals 1, G equals 2, and T equals 3. And when we calculate, we find that PAAA and PCCC are equal. Similarly, PACG and PACT will be equal. Using these calculations, we saw that it has a lot of symmetry in it. And if all the calculations are done, we get 5 different classes. In here, we don't have to calculate all the 64 possibilities. If we calculate 5 of them, it is enough. This is the end of my presentation. We looked at the one way to find the probability in evolutionary. We have lots of models. We saw one of them. The other models use some other techniques in algebraic geometry. And that's all from me. At last, I thank to my mentor, Dilara, for her patience and thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Deniz Özdemir from University. Today I will talk about all matrix groups are real. Here's my outline. I will first introduce basic steps like what's a real number, what's a complex number, and what's quaternions. And then I will define the matrix groups as real groups. And then I will define the orthogonal groups and I will conclude my presentation. Now let's look at our number systems. We all know what's the real numbers, of course. We all know what's a complex numbers. As you can see, A and B in R, A plus BI, it can be represented with this, and I square is -1. And we might not know what are the quaternion of this. We can define the quaternion as a 4 tuple, like in R4, like we define C like R2, we can say that A plus BI plus CJ plus DK and all A, B, C, D are in real numbers. And we can also say that H is isomorphic to C square. This means that we can write this A plus BI plus CJ plus DK as A plus BI plus C plus DI times J. And the multiplication rules are like this, as you can see, I square, J square, K square is -1, and I, J, K, and J, K, I. It's like this. We have I, J, and K. It's like this rotation, like I times J equals K, K times I equals J, and J times K equals I. And what are the conjugate of quaternions? It's A minus BI minus CJ minus DK. Now, before the definition of matrix groups, we have to first define what's a general linear group. The general linear group is a matrices, n by n matrices, which are invertible, which means the determinant of A is non-zero. And it forms a group under matrix multiplication. Now, what's a matrix group? Matrix group is a subgroup of the general linear group, where our field is R, C, or H. And that is the set of invertible n by n matrices closed under multiplication and inversion. And these matrix groups are reflect the geometric and algebraic structure. Now let's look at this theorem. All matrix groups are real. We can represent all complex and quaternionic matrices as a real matrix. And this theorem says that the GLN over complex numbers is isomorphic to a subgroup of GL 2n over R, and GLN over quaternions is isomorphic to a subgroup of GL2n over complex numbers. Hence, we can say that GLN over quaternions is the isomorphic to a subgroup of GL4N over R. And this shows that all matrix groups can be analyzed via real matrices. Now, how can we do this embedding? The idea is that we will consider an n by n complex matrix, and we will represent as 2n by 2n real matrix. First of all, we have to define a math, which is row 1. Row 1 is, if we add A plus BI in row 1, it gives a matrix AB minus B and A. And the basic example is that we know that e to the I theta is a rotation by theta. And also we know that the cosine theta, sine theta, minus sine theta, and cosine theta is a counterclockwise rotation by theta. So we get that rho 1 e to the I theta is equal to the rotation matrix. And step 2 is we will define the complex vectors as a real vectors. How can we do this? We said that the C is isomorphic to R squared, so we can write A1 plus B1I as A1 B1 as a real vector. And step 3 is that the complex matrix 2n by 2n real matrices for any A in complex matrix, we define rho n by replacing each entry A plus BI with rho 1 A plus BI. We can think about like this. In each entry, we can see as a block of this one. Like in this entry, this is the representative. Now, let's look at the quaternionic matrices as real matrices. For doing this, we have to first embed the quaternionic matrix into complex matrices. For that, we will define the Wn, and this is like row 2, but not exactly, because in here we have to take a conjugate of vector or of entries, and then after doing this, we will use again in previous method to we apply row 2, and we get this 4 by 4 matrix. And the resulting matrices are called quaternionic linear real matrices. And we can see that not all matrices are quaternionic linear matrices. So when we define this quaternion matrices, we will say that it's isomorphic to a subgroup of GL4N. Now, first, before the definition of an orthogonal group, we have to define what's a linear product and what's a norm. We all know the standard inner product in R as dot product, and for complex numbers we know as Hermitian product, and for k is equal to h, we will set a symplectic inner product, and the definition is like this. Now, what is norm? Norm is actually a length, and we will define this as a norm of x is equal to square root of the inner product x with itself. And we have this theorem. It says that f preserved norms if and only if the norm of fx is equal to norm of x for all x in k to the n. And we also said that f also preserved the inner product if fx, the inner product of fx and fy is equal to the inner product of x and y for all x and y. Now let's define the orthogonal group. What is the orthogonal group over K? It's any invertible matrix A, xa, ya is equal to xy for all xy in Km. For K is equal to R, we denote it as On, which is the orthogonal matrices. And for K is equal to C, we will denote it as Un, which are the unitary matrices. And for K with symplectic form, we denote that as Spn, which are the elements of symplectic matrices. Here we will set that A star is equal to A conjugate transpose. Now let us look at the definition of ON, UN, and SPN. ON is any invertible real matrix such that A transpose times A is equal to identity. And unitary matrices is defined as any A in any invertible A in complex number, A star times A is equal to identity, and SPN is also for any A in quaternionic matrices, A star A is equal to identity. Now let us look at the characterization of orthogonal matrices. It's the same thing that we said. A is orthogonal matrices and A transpose times A is equal to identity, or A preserves dot products, or the rows and columns of A form an orthonormal basis. These are all the same things. Now let's look at the special subgroups, special orthogonal subgroups. Firstly, we will see that SON, which are the proper rotations, and we will define SON as for any orthogonal matrix A determined with A is equal to 1. And SUN is for any unitary matrix determined with A is equal to 1, which are called special unitary matrices. And these all groups are connected and preserves orientation, which means that SP1 is isomorphic to SU2 is isomorphic to SQ. And this is the inclusion diagram of SON, ON, and GLN. Now, for conclusion, we see that all matrices can be embedded into real matrix groups, and the structures of orthogonal groups are preserves geometry, and norm and inner product preservation connects algebra and geometry. And it is important to understand this symmetry in physics and mathematics. And thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank everyone who helped with in this organization, and I would like to thank my mentor for always being supportive. And in this talk, we will focus on two main topics and their applications. First, we will explain what a time series is and what its components can tell us about the data. Then we will apply Taken's embedding theorem for the time series. In the second part, we will discuss methods from topological data analysis. In particular, we will construct a bit of Zerda complex and compute for its first convolution. And finally, we will apply these methods first to a synthetic time series, then to a real-world time series. So, what's the time series? A time series is simply a sequence of data points collected or recorded over time. And for example, data stock prices, monthly car sales, and yearly water usage. Each of these examples represents data recorded as regular intervals. And there are two types of time series based on their variables. First one is univariate time series. Look at this time series. We can see that in 1962, around 12,000 cars were sold. The other one is multivariate time series, meaning that multiple values are recorded at each point in time. In this plot, the blue points represent carbon monoxide concentration, and the orange points represent nitrogen dioxide concentrations. So we can see two different variables at the same, we measured at the same time. And a time series generally consists of three main components. A trend component shows the long-term direction of the data, which can be increasing or decreasing. The seasonal component represents repeating patterns over time. And the residual component represents the irregular part of the data, including the noise. Now let's look at this component in the time series. In the trend component, we can see a long-term upward movement from first value to the last value. The data has so we can say that the data has a trend. And looking at the seasonal component, we can see the same pattern repeating every 12 months. So we can say that the data has a clearly yearly seasonality. And the residual components look like this. And we reconstruct the original time series by either adding or multiplying this component. Another way to analyze time series is the autocorrelation function. The autocorrelation function shows how a time series is related with past values at different time lags. In this ACF plot, the vertical lines represents autocorrelation values at each lags. And in the plot, the peaks shows the lag where the autocorrelation, the correlation is strong. In this example, we can see at 12 and 24, 24 and 36 peaks. We can see peaks. And we can say that the data has a yearly seasonal pattern. So the data has yearly seasonality. And in this way, to analyzing the time series for using topological data analysis. And first we need a topological representation. So we use Thesis embedding theorem. Thesis embedding is a method that transforms a one-dimensional data into a hyperdimensional point cloud. And this method uses past values with time delay to embed the data into the desired space. If we want to embed our one-dimensional time series, to two-dimensional space, we take xti, the original time series values, time ti, as the x coordinate, and xi plus 2, the delayed value, as the y coordinate. So we embed the data into the two-dimensional space. And if we want to embed our one-dimensional time series into the three-dimensional space. We follow the same steps and including additional delayed values such as x star plus tau and x star plus 2 tau. Now we have obtained topological representations, so we can analyze using TDI. TDA uses topology to understand structural features and shape within data. TDA is particularly effective in uncovering patterns at higher dimensional, complex and long data sets. And first, we can build a simplification complex. So we start with simplexes. A zero simplex is just a point, and one simplex is a line segment between 2 points, and two simplex is a triangle, a filled triangle, and the three simplex is a solid tetrahedron, and we construct a simplification complex using simplices with certain rules. For example, and given a point cloud, if we want to build a simplification complex, we can use special types of complexes. In our case, we will use Vitor-Stipes complex. And the Vitor-Stipes complex, to draw circles, for say in certain radius of points. If two circles overlap, we draw with an H, and if more circles overlap, we form triangle and tetrahedron and more higher dimensions. And we use a simplification complex. We can compute its homology. First, we will examine weight numbers of surfaces. The circle and the simplification complex have a same weight number. There have one connected component, so weight 0 is 1, and there have one dimensional hole, so weight 1 is 1, and these don't form two-dimensional surfaces, so weight 2 is 0, and the weight number is same, so the circle homomorphic to the simplification complex homomorphic circle, and the cipher has a cipher, and the tetrahedron has a same beta numbers, and look like this. And Now we compute persistent homology, and we have 50 points. So at filtration 0, we just have a point cloud. So beta 0 is 50 and beta 1 is 0. And at filtration 0.92, we 47 connected components that have died, and just 3 connected components. So beta 0 is 3, and we don't have one-dimensional holes, so beta 1 is 0. At filtration 1.12, 2 connected components have died, so just leaving 1 connected component. So beta 0 is 1, and 4 one-dimensional holes born, and beta 1 is 4. At filtration 1.51, we just have 1 connected component and 2 one-dimensional. So beta 0 is 1 and beta 1 is 2. At filtration 2.33, and all one-dimensional holes have died. We just have 1 connected component and look like this, or all connections are in this persistent features, we visualize it. Visualize the persistent diagram. Persistent diagram shows birth and death scale. X coordinate as a birth scale and Y coordinate as a death scale. If and the points are the features. If it points close to diagonal, like this, is topological noise. Is points far to diagonal, represent topological features, and also we visualize it with a persistent barcode, and the long bars show topological features, and the short bars show topological noise. So we learn same methods. So we apply this method. First, we can reprocess to data by normalizing, cleaning, or applying Deniz embedding theorem. Then we construct a simple shape complex. Then we compute persistent homology, and to information to use extract the persistent features and interpret them. The first data set is synthetic time series, and generated sine function in the interval 0 to 100 and 100 samples and time series possibilities. And in this ASL plot, we can see peaks 63 and 126 and 188. So the data has a same pattern every 63 steps. So the data is sequenced. And to analyzing the topological data analysis, we will take a symmetric theorem with our optimal parameters, and data set is looks like a circle, and we call the persistent conversion, and its most persistent feature is H1, and we know circle has one connected compound and one dimensional host. So we know the data when we mark the circle, and we can see the data look like a circle, and the persistent diagram we can commemorate circles. And the other one, the application we work time series, map average temperature in Cambodia, and data looks like this. In this ASAP plot, we can see peaks 12, 24, 36, and 48 lags. So the data has a yearly seasonality, and we can use take a symmetric theorem. And this persistent diagram, we can the same. The most persistent features is H1. So we can say that if data has the seasonality, and the most persistent feature is 1H1. And my reference.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Today I will be talking about, as you said, network biology and approach of graph theory to protein-protein interaction. So this is my overview. First, I will talk about some molecular interactions and biological networks, and graph theory concepts in biology. And then I will be talking about PPI properties, protein-protein interaction properties, and a case study in yeast. And then we'll be talking about logistic regression and as a baseline model for prediction. And lastly, we will focus on feature directions. So every cell is a network of molecular interactions, which means that the key workers in the cell are proteins, and they build structures, carry signals, and speed up reactions. Proteins rarely act alone to do our work in the cell, so they interact with each other and to perform the functions. And for example, hemoglobin proteins bind together to carry oxygen. Enzyme complexes breaks down the food that we eat into energy, and signaling proteins turning genes on or off if needed. And understanding these protein-protein interactions is essential for biology and medicine. So this talk will focus on PPI networks mostly, but I want to give examples of other types of biological networks. There are 3 main types, and the other 2 are metabolic networks and gene regulatory networks. An example for metabolic networks is enzyme catalyzed reactions. As we see in this picture, we have some enzymes called UMP, UDP, UTP, and CTP, and they are using magnesium and some other molecules to transfer ATP to ADP. If you don't know what ATP is like a basic molecule in our cells that gives us energy. But we just want the relationship between those molecules, those enzymes. So we kind of delete those, exclude those. And now what we have here is only the enzymes, and we can clearly see the interactions between them. So visualizing biology as a network helps us to see the complexity in a simple and organized way. So and I mentioned gene regulatory networks, and the example for that is feed-forward loop, which is essentially it's a small recurring motif that we see a lot of in the cells and in these networks. And feed-forward loop is basically a double-checking mechanism. It prevents accidental activation and ensures the response is stronger. So what we mean here by this is the X molecule, for example, gives a message to Y, and Y transfers this message to Z. But the same message can be transformed from X to Z directly also. But Z do not act just on when he just got the message from Y or just from X. It waits for from both of those messages. It's just double checking. So now let's talk about some graph theory concepts in biology. It's actually very basic. As you all know, in mathematics, a graph is defined as V, E, where V is a set of vertices and E is a set of edges. We are gonna call the vertices nodes in our talk today. Nodes represent proteins in our case, and edges represents the relationships or interactions between those nodes, aka proteins. So, and the degree is the number of connections a protein does with other proteins. So we have 2 images here. As you can see, they are very similar. One is undirected and the other is directed network. So I'll show you the nodes. These are our proteins, and all of them nodes. And these lines are edges, the interactions between them. So as you can see, there's not a direct interaction between C and D, but there's a direct direction between A and C, A and G, G and F. And degree is the number of connections. As I told you, for example, A here has 5 connections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For example, C has 2, just 1, 2. So in directed networks, what's the difference between them? The difference is, for example, D can carry a message to A, but A can't carry a message to D. If it wants to do that, he can go, I don't know, how can he go? He can't go. There is no way. So that is what the arrow means here. So we have also other terms. Once we represent these networks as graphs, we can analyze hubs. So hubs are actually nodes, the proteins, but they're a special kind of proteins. They're the proteins with the most connections, with the highest degree. So if we go back to these figures, for example, here, what is the hub? Which one is the hub? The hub is the A protein, the A node, because it has the most, it has the highest degree, the most connections in this network. So we can also determine clustering coefficients, which is the tendency of neighbors to connect. What do I mean by neighbors? So think of a protein and node, and then it has like neighbor proteins, and those neighbor proteins may have connections, like interactions with each other or not. So clustering coefficient is like the probability and the tendency of those neighbor proteins to connect. And then we can calculate shortest, so-called shortest path length, which is like the minimum space between two nodes. So for example, if we again go back, we can see here that if I want to go to, for example, where do I want to go? Let's see here. I want to go to E. I can take this route from A, 1, 2, 3, edge, or I can like here, like 1, 2, 3, edge, or I can go from here like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So why we calculate the shortest path line is because the cell doesn't want to spend energy while doing like while there's like work going on in the cell. So the shortest path length means like minimum cost, and they generally choose that path to interact with each other. We have so-called motifs, which are like small recurring patterns of interactions. Like triangles are like very basic. It's like a very basic shape, as you all know. So we can see that a lot in the networks. Also, feed-forward loop, I mentioned like a few slides back. That is also a recurring motif. And modules are groups of proteins that are highly connected and working together to perform a specific job. So now let's talk about protein-protein interaction networks, which we will call PPIs. Now let's recall that nodes are proteins and edges are physical binding between them. So we have experimental detection to know which protein interacts with which. We have used through hybrid screens and mass spectrometry. And the applications of that are like to predict protein function, like which function plays in like which role in the cell, and identify disease mechanisms and like find drug targets. So now let's talk about network properties of PPIs. They have scale-free topology. This means that few hubs, many low-degree proteins. Yeah, there are like also other kinds of topology, like in a different like topology network. Like I can show this, for example, like here, like you can. These are like our proteins are like nodes, but like it's like random, you know. It's like random. Everything makes like every connection with like each other, and it's like they have like equal degrees and stuff like that. You know, it's not just like one protein like with the like highest degree. And also we have like I'm gonna mention in a minute this. Okay. And we have something called small word effects. This means that you can go from one protein to another in a very short way. So there's like always shortcuts. And we have a property called disruptivity, which means go direct next to other hubs. This is like a small network, so hubs here actually connect with each other, but like in like most cases, they're like the networks are like really huge, and the hubs don't have like the direct links between them, and they have a so-called hierarchical modularity, which means small clusters combine into larger clusters. For example, this means like, okay, we have this kind of like network here, and we have some kind of network here, and like these are like all large proteins, and they connect to each other with like few links. They're connected to each other, but like each are all networks on their own. So let's move on to a case study. This is actually a PPI network. This is yeast, and it has like 6,000 proteins in it. And as you see, there's like a accumulation in the center. The largest like cluster contains approximately 78% of all proteins. And if you remove a hub, remember the hub is the protein with like the most interactions. So if you remove a hub, it can be lethal to the network. So network can collapse and like not function. And like this is an experiment. So the color of the node represents the effect of removing the corresponding protein. For example, if you move the or like harm the red nodes, the proteins, it becomes lethal for the network. But if you remove the green ones, it's non-lethal, it's okay. And if you move the like orange ones, which you can't really see because they are like pre-whiting, so it makes the yeast growth like very slow, and the yellows are unknown. And we have some tools and databases which are like open source. So I'm not gonna like get into too much detail to help us to predict the interactions between the proteins. And we have modern applications. Recently, graph theory and machine learning have been combined for PPI analysis. So we have graph neural networks, GNNs, which what does this do is to learn protein embeddings and predict the interactions. And we have generative models, GNNs, predict missing edges in PPI networks, which means like maybe you can be wondering like what is like missing edge. So experiments are costly, they're expensive. So and when you do an experiment, there are like thousands of proteins, as you've seen like in the previous slides. So there can be like missing edges. For example, like two proteins are actually interact, but while doing the experiments, you can detect that because you just miss it, or like because like it had like data is too much. So coding and like machine learning algorithms are cheap compared to the experimental ones. So, for example, GNNs predict edges. And cell-type specific PPI prediction, this is for precision medicines, for personalized medicine. And with integration with omics data, it causes like better biological insights. So now let's talk about some logic. Let's talk about logistic regression. So it's a very basic starting point for computational biology projects. It's a statistical method for binary classification problems, and it predicts the probability of belonging to a class. And it is used in biology to decide if a protein pair interacts or not. Like if it interacts, it's 1. If it doesn't, it's 0. So the output is always between 0 and 1. So how it works? So each protein pair is described by like features, shared neighbors, sequence similarities, such as. So this model combines features into a linear score. Like here Z is equal to the W1, X1 plus, W2, X2 plus, it goes on like this, and we have like a B constant. So these X's are like the features, and like these W's are like the weights, like corresponding weights for them. So what does it mean? Like if X1 is like a more important feature, then this weight is like numerically it is higher than the other W's. So we find the Z's, and this score is passed through the sigmoid function to squash it between 0 and 1. And the result is the probability of the interaction between proteins.
Geçen sene vardı, replikal abartı.
Yes. The sigmoid function is this 1 over 1 plus a to the minus z, and as you can see, it's like a S shaped. And okay, I can flip it. So there's like a example logistic regression code written in Python. So we import the necessary libraries and then load the PPI network, and then we extract features for protein pairs, as I mentioned you before, and then we train the model, and then we can make new prediction with the new data. Okay, so these features, these images are about like breast cancer data set and computer mathematics. Like as a visual result of the code that you used before. And the x-axis is mean radius and the y-axis is mean texture. And you can see these are like the two kinds of proteins, which are like cancerous and like non-cancerous. So what does as you can see, they're already like kind of separated, but there are still like blue ones here and like the red ones here. They're like mixed. So what does logistic regression does is it's kind of tries to find the possibility like make a prediction right here in the intersection. And this is confusion metric. This is about so let's say like this is 1 means there's like an interaction, 0 means there's not an interaction. And what does the algorithm do is it actually predicted like 137 non-introduction, because like the actual there's like 137 protein pairs that are not like connected to each other, and we predicted that right. And we also like have 128 like protein pair interactions, and we predict that right also. But like we have like 10 false positive and like 20 false negative results, which is actually good. It's a good prediction because like we don't wanna overfit it because it can cause like other problems as well. So why it matters? Because it reveals functional organization of cells, it accelerates drug discovery and helps predict unknown protein roles, and it integrates biology, mathematics, and computer science, like showing how interdisciplinary approaches can advance science. So looking ahead, we have like exciting directions to integrate more data types, to develop more accurate machine learning models for PPI prediction, build patient-specific interaction networks, and explore dynamic time-dependent network changes. So to summarize, graph theory provides a powerful framework for biology. PPI networks uncover how proteins work together. Thirdly, logistic regression and modern machine learning improve prediction, and by understanding the network structures, it's better to it leads to a better disease treatment strategies. These are my references, and thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Zerda. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this program. This process has been very efficient for me. I improved my English and learned new topics. I especially want to thank Kirpa teacher. Together we studied the topic of representation theory. First, we recall some important definition. Oh, okay. What will I speak about? I will talk about vector space and some important definition, linear transformation, group action, and finally representation theory. Let us start with vector space. What is a vector space? There are 8 properties for a non-empty set V to be a vector space over a file depth. First property, associative of addition. The second, communicative of addition. Third, additive identity. Fourth, additive inverse. Fifth, associative of scalar multiplication. Sixth, multiplicative identity. Seventh, distributivity of scalar multiplication over vector addition. And eighth properties, distributivity of scalar multiplication over file addition. Now I will talk about linear independencies, span, basis, and dimension. These are important definitions for us, and we will use them later. First definition will be a vector space over F. Subset of V is called a set of linearly independent vectors. It whenever the sum from 1 to n of alpha I VR equal 0. With alpha I alpha n in F, Vi alpha Vn element of S, then for all alpha I equals 0. Second definition, we have vector space again of over a file depth and set of, let's set S equal V1, V2, Vn, subset V. The span of S is the set of all linearly combination of the vectors in S. That is span of S. Equal alpha 1, V1 plus alpha 2, V2 plus alpha k, Vk with alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha k in F. Third definition, a basis of a vector space V over F is a set of linearly independent vectors that span V. An ordered basis is just a basis where we fix the order of the vectors. And finally, definition, V has a finite basis. The dimension of V denoted dim F. V is the number of vectors in any basis. If no finite basis exists, then V is infinite dimensional. Now, we define a linear transformation. V and W be vector space over the same file depth. T, V to W function is a linear transformation if for all U V in V and C element of C, T of U plus V equal T of U plus T of V and T of CU equal C T of U. Now, next we are interested in characterization of linear transformation. In terms of matrices, we will use this result later in the proof. So we are very important. V and W be finite dimensional vector space over F, sum F, with ordered basis beta for V and epsilon for W. T, V to W, linear transformation, then the metric representation of T with respect to beta and epsilon is the unique matrix T beta epsilon such that T of V epsilon equal T beta epsilon V beta for all V in V. An example. Define T R2 to R2 T XA XU equal X plus 2Y and 3X plus Y. And let's get B1 and B2 in standard basis. Then this linear transformation of basis element are follow. T10 equal 13 and T01 equal 2, 1. Let's write it on a matrix. T beta 1, beta 2 equal 1, 2, 3, 1. And by definition, T of V beta 2 equal 1, 2, 3, 1 product xy equal x plus 2y and 3x plus y. Now, we will see in converse way. The corresponding to every matrix, we have a linear transformation. That is, any m times n matrix A defines a linear transformation. TA Rm to Rm and TA of x equal ax. Conversely, every linear transformation between finite dimensional vector space can be represented by a unique matrix once bases are chosen. An example, let A equal 1, 2, 3, 1 and TA by definition xy equal A product xy equal x plus 2y and 3x plus y. We know linear transformation does represented TA. Now, we need to define group action. Then we will define representation and start representation theory. A group action of a group G on a set A is a map G times A to A, GA goes to G dot A, such that for all G1, G2 in G and A in A, first properties, G1 dot G2 dot A equal G1, G2 dot A. Second properties, E dot A equal A, where E is the identity of G. An example, let G equal Sm and A equal set of 1, 2, dot, dot, dot, and define a map Sm times A to A, sigma A goes to sigma dot A, defines sigma of A. We check this group action. Properties 1, sigma 1, sigma 2 in Sm and A in A, sigma 1 dot, sigma 2 dot A, by definition, alpha 1 of alpha 2 of A, and we know alpha sigma 1 composition sigma 2 of A, and we know alpha 1, alpha 2 by definition we know. Alpha 1, sigma 1, sigma 1, sigma 2 dot A. Second property, for the identity E element of Sm and all A element of A, E dot A equal by definition, A E of A equal A. Hence, this mapping defines a group action of Sm on A. And we can start representation theory. First, let's define representation. G be a finite group and V a vector space over F5F. First definition, linear representation of G is a group homomorphism. Rho G to GLB, where GLB is a group of all inverse linear transformation from V to V. The degree of the representation is dimensional of V. Second definition, for an element of Z class, a metric representation of G is again group homomorphism rho G to GLNF, where GLNF is a set of invertible n times n matrices with entries in F. And third properties, representation linear or matrix is called faithful if rho is injective. 1-to-1. An example. We get one-dimensional vector space over F and define the action G dot V equal V for all G in G and V in V. This gives a representation rho G to GLV defined by rho of G equal identity V. Identity V, V to V, is an identity linear transformation. Namely, identity V of V equal V. For all V in V, clearly, identity V element of GLV since it is invertible. Okay, we know what we need all definition, so let's examine representation indicates a group action. Every representation rho G to GLV defines a group action of G on the vector space V by G times V to V, G V goes to G dot V, we now defines rho of G of V for all G in G and V in V. Let's prove that. First properties. G1, G2 in G and V in V. G1 dot G2 dot V equal by definition rho of G1, rho of G2 of V, and by composition equal rho of G1, rho of G2 V. We know rho is a homomorphism, so we write rho of G1, G2 of V, and by definition, G1, G2 dot V. Second properties. For V in V, 1G dot V equal, by definition, rho of 1G of V, and rho is a homomorphism we know. Then rho of 1G equal identity V. So rho of 1G of V equal identity V of V and equal V. Conclusion, the map GV goes to rho of G of V is a group action of G on V induced by the representation rho. Now, let's examine relationship between linear representation and metric representation. Let's rho G to GLV linear representation, where dim of V equal N, choosing a basis beta of V gives an isomorphism. Phi GLV to GLNC, T goes to T beta. Hence, we obtain a metric representation, rho beta, G to GLNC, and G goes to rho of G beta. The result of the metric representation proves that. So, what is it if we change bases? Let's recall. Definition, the matrix beta 2i beta 1 is a matrix of the identity map with domain base beta 1 and codomain base beta 2. It expresses each vector of beta 1 in terms of beta 2. So P defines beta 1 I beta 2 is a change of basis matrix from beta 1 to beta 2. Let beta 2 equal set W1 Wn be another basis of V and T B to V, a linear. Then the matrices of T in the two bases are related by T beta 2 equal P T beta 1 P inverse, where we say P define beta 2 I beta 1 and then P inverse equal beta 1 I beta 2. From here, we can see two matrix representation, theta 1 to theta 2, G to GLK, C are called equivalent. Written theta 1 tilde theta 2. If there exists an invertible matrix, Q element of GLK C, such that theta 2 of G equal Q theta 1 G Q inverse for all G in G. And result, if rho G to GLV is a linear representation, then for two ordered base beta 1 and beta 2 of V, the corresponding matrix representation G goes to rho of G beta 1 and G goes to rho of G beta 2 are equivalent. Reference, my reference. Thank you for listening.
So I think after 4 days and 40 talks on graph theory, I'll just give the definition of graphs. I think we have all had a graduate course for that. So basically, okay, so my basic outline of the talk is I'll talk about what Roman domination is, some properties of what RDFs are, and some special cases on how graphs look when my Roman domination number is special, and what are some open problems that people might be working on. So basically, at a long time ago, there was a Roman Empire, Constantine. He had a lot of legions and he wanted to conquer and also safeguard. So he decided that if I have a lot of army in one region, so that region should be close to the region which has no army. So why the name it's called as Roman domination. And based on this topic, Charles Ravel and Kenneth Rosing decided how to mathematize this problem. So basically, I will just give you some basic definitions on what open and closed neighborhoods are. So basically, open neighborhood is all the neighbors of V excluding V, and closed neighborhood is all the neighbors of V including V. Just like that. So basically, a dominating set is called dominating because either I give you any vertex, either that vertex is in the dominating set or it has a neighbor in the dominating set. And smallest such dominating set is called as gamma set. So if you know what a vertex cover is, every vertex cover is a dominating set, but every dominating set might not be a vertex cover. Okay? So now we define what a Roman domination function is. So think of it as a three coloring of any graph. So it maps from a set of vertices to 0, 1, and 2. And the thing is, every vertex that is colored 0 should be a neighbor to a vertex that is colored 2. So this makes sense. What Constantine was trying to do. I have a lot of army here. I want to keep it close to some place I have no army, right? So then we define what weight of this function is. So weight of this function is just the sum of all values of my vertices. So this is clearly n1 plus 2 and 2, where n1 is the number of vertices colored 1, and n2 is the number of vertices colored 2, right? So now I define what Roman domination of function is. So I give you an RDF. So the function which has the minimum weight of an RDF is called a Roman domination number. And now I define, so for every partition, for every map, I can partition my vertices set into V0, V1 and V2, where V0 is colored 0, V1 is colored 1 and V2 is colored 2. Okay, so these are some basic properties of Roman domination function. So my gamma G always lies between gamma G and 2 gamma G. This is very easy to prove. If you need, I'll prove it later. So this inequality we'll be focusing on our talk. So basically what we are trying to do is what happens when the equality on both sides occur. So now if the lower bound equality occurs, then G has to be Kn bar. So Kn bar is basically set of n vertices and no edges, right? So now if I have a gamma R function, so now gamma R function is an RDF with the least weight. So gamma R function, so the graph induced by V1 has degree less than 1, less than or equal to 1. So this is fairly easy to prove, because if I have degree less than or equal to 2, then my weight will become 3, and then I can just remove 1, put 1, 0, and just connect it to some vertex which is colored 2. So fairly easy proofs. So now we try, so like every mathematician, when he discovers what, I find a new quantity, I try to bound it, like always. So I try to now bound gamma G in terms of n and delta. So basically if I have an RDF with weight gamma R, then my V0 has to be less than delta V2, because my every V0 edge has to be connected to some vertex with color 2. So V0 is less than delta, and my delta plus 1 gamma R, and then I just expand what gamma R is. So we basically get that gamma R is greater than 2n by delta plus 1. And now if I want to bound this function above, this proof has a very interesting probabilistic approach. So basically what I'm trying to do here is, I try to find a set A, so that each vertex in set A is there with probability P. So my expected value of my set A is NP. Now what I'm trying to do is, now I try to find a set B, which is V minus the closed neighborhood of set A. So basically I have A, I have this neighbor of A, this is my V, so I'm trying to find this B, right? So what I try to, so basic probabilistic. So now what I can say that clearly V, A union B, VA is an RDF, because every vertex here is connected to every vertex here, and is clearly an RDF. So probability that my V is in B is 1 minus P into degree of V, because each vertex has degree V probability to be in that set. And then this is a far useful proof we use everywhere. So this says that probability for a vertex V to be in B is less than e power this. So which leads that my expected size of B is n into e power minus p into 1 plus delta G. So the expected weight of my function is 2np, which is of plus n e power minus e power 1 plus delta G. Now, using simple calculus, we can just find value for what V this is minimum, put that P, and we just try to find. So the minimum expected weight of V happens to be this. So now, as I told you, what happens when the equalities here and here occur? So basically, when equalities here occur, G has to be just vertices, no edges. Now, clearly, gamma G has to be greater than gamma G plus 1. So what happens if gamma G is equal to gamma G plus 1? What happens there? So basically, if I have a vertex of degree n minus gamma G, then for sure I will always have my gamma G to be equal to gamma G plus 1. So we can prove this, like, we can prove this. Say, I have case 1 where my V1 is gamma G plus 1 and V2 is 0. Since V2 is 0, my whole V1 is V. And we use the fact that gamma G is less than n by 2 for all connected graph for G on n vertices. This can be proved using perfect matching. Thus, n gamma G plus 1 is for which it implies that n is less than 2, for which our graph is a path. And thus and that verifies that for gamma P2 is 2, which is gamma P2 plus 1, as a vertex should be gamma R, which has degree less than 1. And again, now my case 2 is if V1 is gamma G minus 1 and V2 is one vertex, then let V2 be any vertex V. And now by the properties we know that there is no vertex, no edge between V1 and V2. So there is no edge between V1 and V, V dominates V0. So degree of V has to be V0, which is n minus V1 minus V2, which is n minus gamma G. Now there is no, you can see that I cannot split gamma G plus 1 in any other way between V1 and V2, because if I do, then V1 plus V2 will be less than gamma G. So now, what if my given graph is a tree? Then I define something called as a spider. So I have two kinds of spider, a wounded spider and a healthy spider. So my healthy spider is a star such that of degree t. So this is a star of degree t. And all of its edges I am subdividing into two edges. So if all of my edges are subdivided, then this is a healthy spider. And if I have at least one edge which is not subdivided, then it is called as a wounded spider. Now we can use similar proof. So if I have a tree with two or more vertices and it follows that gamma t is equal to gamma t plus 1, then t has to be a wounded spider. So this was quite interesting. And the converse is also true. So now another interesting part is what happens if gamma rg is gamma g plus 2. So this can happen if and only if G has no vertex of degree n minus gamma G, or G has a vertex of degree n minus gamma G minus 1, or G has vertices V and W such that union of neighbor of V and W are n minus gamma G plus 2. So this proof is similar to the proof we did before. So we will use contradiction. We will again try to split gamma G plus 2, gamma G plus 1 again into V1 and V2. We then find that for n less than 4, we use all the same notions, and we find that for n less than 4, all of my graphs follow gamma G is equal to gamma G plus 1. So my first case is nullified. Case 2 is V2 is equal to 1 and V1 is equal to gamma G. And case 3 is V2 is equal to 2 and V1 is equal to gamma G minus 2. So there will be no other case, because if there is any other case, then again the total will be less than gamma G. So then there is this again an interesting theorem with a very, very long proof, that if I have this, then my graph is small and my radius is even small. Radius is between 3 and 8, diameter is between 3 and 8, and radius is between 2 and 4. So now I try to find where the upper equality holds. So we call this graph as Roman graphs. So now think, for example, like I have a graph which has a vertex of degree n minus 1. So if I have a vertex of degree n minus 1, I can give that vertex the color 2, and all of my rest of my vertices I can give the color 0. So my gamma r is 2, and my gamma g is the only vertex with the dominating set will be the vertex with the degree n minus 1. So my gamma g is equal to 2 gamma g. So this is one example of a Roman graph. Now what happens to a Roman graph? How do Roman graphs look like? So basically a graph is Roman if and only if it has a gamma function such that n1 is equal to 0. Pretty cool, right? So we can prove this, like if f is a gamma function of g, then we know that V2 is the dominating set of graph induced by V0 union V2, and V2 is dominated by V naught, and V1 union V2 is dominates V. So gamma G is less than equal to V1 union V2, which is equal to V1 plus V2, which is less than V1 plus 2, which is equal to gamma G. But since G is Roman, 2 gamma G is equal to 2V1 plus 2V2, which is gamma G. Hence V1 has to be 0. So similarly, converse works the same in similar ways. So V1 union V2 dominates V, so it follows that V2 is the dominating set of G. Since V2 is a gamma set of graph induced by V0 union V2, V2 is equal to gamma G, and gamma G is equal to gamma G. Hence G is a Roman. Now we looked at problems where gamma G is equal to gamma G plus 1. So how many other classes? So there are open problems which people are working on, like how many other classes of Roman graphs are there? Or can we generalize the classes for where gamma G is equal to gamma G plus K? Or what can we say? I give you any graph. How large can my set of N naught? How large can my set of N1 be? Or how large can my set of N2 be? So these are all open problems that we are trying to work on. Thank you all. I'd like to thank Ahmed for our interesting and fun conversations, and to DRP for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
I will talk about the random graphs and their symmetries. I will first discuss universal graphs to obtain the random graphs. Then I will show that infinite random graphs are isomorphic to the random graph, and finally I will talk about the asymmetries of graph. Let's start with some basic definition. A graph G consists of a vertex set and an edge set where an edge is an unordered pair of distinct elements of the vertex of G. And a subgraph of the graph G is a subset of the vertex set and a subset of the edge set. And an induced subgraph of the graph G is a subgraph G obtained by taking a subset of W of the vertex of G together with every edge of G that has both endpoints in W. So here there are some graph examples. The first two graphs is the subgraph of this graph, but this subgraph is not induced because this edge is missing. But this graph is the induced subgraph. And we say that two graphs G1 and G2 is isomorphic if there exists a bijection between the vertex set of this graph such that it presents the neighborhood relation. And in this case, we confirm isomorphism from G1 to G2. And if G1 is equal to G2, we confirm automorphism, and G1 is called symmetry if it has a non-trivial automorphism, otherwise called asymmetric. So, for example, in this graph, we can find an automorphism sending A to B and D to C. But in this graph, each vertex is spatial, so it has no automorphism except and the identity. So we call this graph is asymmetric. And I will talk about the universal graph. Here we fix two things. P, a set of graphs, and a subset relation for graph like subgraph, induced subgraph, or minor. And we say that G star is universal if G star is in P, and all graphs is in P must be also is in G star. For example, complete graph is that all possible edges included is universal for A is equal to all countable graphs. Because we can find any graphs into complete graphs, but it's not true for the induced subgraph relation, because we can delete some edges in the subgraphs, then it's not a induced subgraph for the complete graph. But for induced subgraph relation, trees is universal, and trees means connected and it contains no cycle. So we can delete only the last edge, but in this case, there is no last edge. So for induced subgraph relation, trees is universal for is equal to compatible trees. And we can ask this question: is there a universal graph for induced subgraph relation and P is equal to all countable graphs? And let's look at following graph property. And let's U and V disjoint finite set, and if for every choice of U and W, if the vertex V is connected to all vertex in U, but is not connected to all vertex in W. And we say that the following properties are. And if a graph has the following property, then we is universal. And to see this, we can show that we can embed any graph G in R. And to see this, we can use induction. If you have already embedded this graph G in R, and you want to embed one more vertices, and it has some neighbors and it has some non-neighbors, let's call the image of neighbors in U, and let's call W with the image of the non-neighbors in R. Since R has the property star, we can find the vertex is connect all vertex in U, but not W. So we can make this vertex to map to V. And in this way, using induction, we can show that we can embed any graph G in R. But is there a graph satisfying this property? And the answer is yes, and it's called the Rado graph. And there exists a unique countable graph with this property. And to see the existence, we can construct this graph step by step. And for each step, calculate for possible U and add any vertex. So, for example, here we have one choices. Choose this vertex and add any vertex. In this graph, we have three choices. Choose one of them or both of them and add each vertex. And if you continue in this manner, at the end of this process, you hold the graph with this property. And to prove uniqueness, we need to find an isomorphism between any graph satisfying this property. And that's called G1 and Q2 satisfy this property. And we prove an isomorphism step by step. At even numbered step, we map G1 to J2, and at odd numbered step, we map G2 to G1. And each step map the first element which hasn't been mapped. So, for example, beginning with A, it can be mapped anywhere, let A prime, then with A prime. But A prime can be arbitrary. If it is neighbor with A prime, the image must neighbor with A. And let U be the set of the image of neighbors, and W be the set of the image of non-neighbors similarly. So, since this graph has proper star, we can find the proper vertex, say C. And then look B, and again choose U and W like this. And since J2 has proper star, we can find a vertex here. And then look C prime. And this process called forward backward method. And if we continue this manner, we can find an isomorphism between G1 to J2. And now I will talk about the random graphs. Here our aim is to turn the set of G of all graphs on some set into the probability space. I will denote the random graphs J and P where and even number of vertices and each edge is included with property P. So here there are some graph examples with different probability. And all the random graphs are defined by chance. In the infinite case, we can still obtain precise information about their structure. So our first observation is the maximum distance between any two vertices of the random graph is equals to. And it is easy to see that. Let's choose two vertices, say 1 and 2. And probability of the third vertices we choose is not connected to 1 or 2, is 1 minus base square. And the probability of the given n vertices is not connected to 1 or 2, is 1 minus base square to the power of n. and its number between 0 and 1. So it goes to 0 as n goes to infinity. And it is the situation where p is equal to 1 over 2. And another observation is we can find any final subgraphs into the random graphs. And let's H be a graph with n vertices and k edges. And let divide the endpoints of the random graphs into n minus n separate sets. And the probability that k is not identical to this n over n vertex is this equation. It is the probability of the existence of k edges, and it is the probability of the non-existence of the remaining edge. And it is the number between 0 and 1, so it tends to 0 as n goes to infinity. So we can find any finite graph into the random graphs. And there is a unique countable random graphs. And its proof is very similar for the uniqueness of the other graph. And here we calculate some probability instead of using probability, the probability star. And at each time, the probability of finding proper vertex tends to 1 and as n goes to infinity. And seeing there is one random graph, we can try to find them. And with probability 1, a random graph is isomorphic to the other graph. And to see this, we choose the length way fixed. And let's be a vertex is not u and v. And it's the probability of this vertex is not joined to u union v as expressed our property is some number less than 1, say r. So it is only depending u and w because each vertex exists of the same probability. And the probability that none of k given vertices v is joined to u union v as expressed is property star is r to the k, which tends to 0 as k goes to infinity. And the other graph is ultra homogeneous. For any vertices u and v, there exists automorphism sending u to v. So it has a lot of symmetries. And so we might accept that as an increase, the chance of being symmetric is also increased. But for finite n, random graphs are almost surely asymmetric. And we will look at when p is equal to 1 over 2. And here I will generate some random graphs. By the way, there is no asymmetric graphs up to the number of vertices is 6. And almost 15 edges, being the probability of being asymmetric is almost 1. And we have this property, almost all graphs are asymmetric. And they denote the omega, the set of containing n vertex graphs, and let a and b the number of asymmetric graphs in omega. And let's call this ratio as mu n. As our theorem says, as n goes to infinity, mu n goes to 1. And we will look at the sketch of the proof of this theorem. And we have this number of graphs with n edges, 2 to the power of n choose 2. And it's equal to average of the orbit length times orbit number. And we have the action of G on the set of all graphs, and orbit scans from here. And the orbit of X consists of the graphs that are isomorphic to X. For example, the complete graphs and their 2 has only one orbit. And we have the onto function J to the orbit of X. And we can make onto by dividing the stabilizer of X. So the order of Gx is equal to this thing, and G is equal to 6, and G is equal to automorphism of X. and because it doesn't change anything, so number of orbits is equal to n factorial over automorphism of x. And we can divide the all graphs into two separate parts, being asymmetric and being symmetric. And if a graph x is here, the number of orbits is n factorial, and because there is no automorphism. And it is the number of the graphs which has no symmetry. And for this part, we know that its graphs has automorphism greater than 2. So this fraction is less than n factorial over 2. And it is the number of asymmetric graphs. And we can use this thing to find the average orbit length. And it is this lemma. And I will just state this lemma. And the number of G orbits satisfies this equation. And the limit of ON is 0 as n goes to infinity. And we begin with equation, and we have an upper bound for this. So if we arrange this equation and taking the limit, we have this equation, and what we have the ratio of the all graphs and asymmetric graphs. So it can't be greater than 1. So it is equal to 1. So we have that almost all graphs are asymmetric. And these are my reference. And thank you for listening.